Hi, I want to continue talking about Hungary in the 16th century on the eve of the Battle of Mohács, and to go through a number of points really to prepare you for the reading that you've got. And of course, much as I hate the idea that you're doing a course on Rady rather than a course on Crown Church estates, there is an important article on rethinking Jagiello, Hungary, which is on the Moodle site. You just have to click it and you'll automatically get it. I've mentioned the word Jagiello. The Jagiellos are originally a Polish dynasty, but they take over Bohemia and they take over Hungary in 1490. The first Jagiello ruler at this point is Władysław II, sometimes known as Ulaslo. Władysław is the best term. Władysław II, who becomes ruler of Hungary in 1490. He's already ruler of Bohemia, and his brother runs Poland. And this is really the premier dynasty in Europe. This interlocked Poland, Bohemia, and Hungary are a dynastic force. They are, in a sense, the proto-Habsburgs. The Habsburgs will take over after them, and they will be analogous in some way, because they will have built up a dynastic power block in Central Europe. But the major dynastic power block, round about 1500 in Central Europe, is the Jagiello kings. And for Hungary, that's 1490 to 1516 is Władysław, and then his son, who's been born in 1506, his son Louis II, who at about the age of most of you will be killed in battle. There's a nice thought, isn't it? So that's the dynasty that runs it. Now, you know the story about Hungarians. That a Hungarian is somebody who enters a revolving door behind you and gets out in front of you. The idea is that they're a little bit tricky, a little bit sharp, manipulative perhaps. Of course, it's one of these national legends. It's like, Italians are always effusive, and the Scots are always dour. It's comes from somewhere, I suppose. But in the case of the Jagiello rulers, kings of Hungary, they are highly manipulative. They have a problem, and that problem is with the Turks. The Turks are pressing forward. They have occupied the Balkans. They have reached the Danube frontier. They have been raiding Hungary, I think, since the 1360s. And it's quite clear that they are going to continue. They're certainly going to try and make Hungary into some sort of satellite, in the same way as they have the Romanian principalities to the east, the Romanian principalities of Moldavia and Wallachia. And the kings of Hungary, Władysław and Louis, constantly go on writing letters to kings, writing letters to the Pope, saying, oh, we haven't got any money. We can't afford to build forts. We can't afford to do anything. In fact, all of you at various points have written letters to your parents or emails or rung them up. Oh, I can't afford to go out. I can't even afford to buy books. please send me a cheque. You've all done that. You've all exaggerated. And particularly when it comes to money, everybody exaggerates, except when it comes to filling in their income tax form. And historians believe all these tales of special pleading, these tales of poverty, these stories of want and woe. They believe them all. Now, I went through the Agalon finances, and my article will illuminate this. And I reckon that they're getting about 600,000, 700,000 ducats a year. Now that compares to France is getting about 2 to 3 million, but France is fantastically wealthy. And, you know, that 700,000, they're windfalls, like a few 100,000 when a bishop's been found to have his fingers in the till and pays for his freedom. They're windfalls as well. So, in other words, these stories of poverty are exaggerated. Historians always go on about they've got these back of the envelope partial calculations which suggest that the royal income is about 100,000 ducats or even less. These are partial. We don't know. One of these is given to a foreign ambassador, one of these calculations. So I mean, we know what's going on there. The Kingdom of Hungary is relatively wealthy, and on top of that, it can put together a pretty impressive army. And in fact, it's got probably, we now know from, I always hate saying the latest research, it's a bit like saying the science shows, but we now know that the Hungarian army has got very large numbers of infantry. Infantry are far more effective on the battlefield by 1500 than cavalrymen, particularly if they're supported by musketeers and they're operating what's called an integrated battle plan, i.e. you move your blocks of infantry to support each other rather than having them run like yahoos into the opposing camp. It's got cannon, it's got all the latest technology. If there had been fighting in Italy, if the Hungarian army had been fighting in Italy, it would have taken northern Italy. There's no doubt, and probably broken through and got Naples. This is a pretty impressive army, and it actually does quite well against the Turks at Mohacs. So in other words, the money's there and the troops are there. And when they lose Belgrade in 1521, they put up a whole cordon of forts to its north to block the Turkish advance. I'll just mention a few points about the social composition of Hungary. Firstly, there is a peasantry. It's not particularly badly exploited. We know that their tax payments are relatively low compared to the European norm, but then they've probably got less to start off with. It's not particularly good soil. Most of the Hungarian plain, some books will go, oh, it's got cornfields, but it hasn't got cornfields at all. The Hungarian plain is a parched desert in the summer, and it is waterlogged in winter. Much of the rest of Hungary consists of mountains. So in other words, this is not particularly fruitful territory. Transylvania, the Transylvanian plateau in the centre, is fertile. That's worth having. Most of Hungary is agriculturally not very rich. It's got mining industry in the north, but that's in the hands of foreigners, and as we know, you can have as much oil as you like. It doesn't make you a wealthy country if the actual refinement and transport is in the hands of foreigners. Otherwise, Nigeria and Venezuela would be super rich countries. Singapore produces nothing. It just deals with trade. It's trade where you make money. The peasantry are not particularly badly exploited. They're not tied to the soil at this point. They do not have particularly heavy labour services or tax payments. The books will tell you that tax has gone up in the 15th century 5 times. That's a very small tax that they're paying. And most of the time, these peasants, they're living off their plots, and surplus they sell to the cities. That surplus gives them coin, and that's what they pay their tax in. They've got two economies: a household economy, which provides for most of their needs, and a money economy, which they gain by trading the excess, which they then use for tax payments and for buying pans and things like that, manufactured goods. The dominant class is the nobility. The nobility account for about 1% of the population. A lot of books will say 5%, 10% even. It's not, it's about 1%. And these, some are rich, some are very poor, some are poorer than the average peasant. Some of them have got what are called 7 plum-treed noblemen, because all they've got for land is 7 plum trees. Others are known as sandals because they can't afford proper footwear. Many of them are poor, but the wealthier ones will have half a dozen, 20 villages, and they will be able to provide from the rents to be able to buy things like a war horse and suit of armour. And these will provide, the nobility will provide the backbone of the army. Despite these differences in status, all of the nobility have a common status. They are all noblemen, and they are equal. They are equal in their freedoms and their liberties, because they all are subordinate directly to the king. There is no feudal structure. There are a few places where noblemen are subordinate mostly to bishops, and they don't count as full nobility. You have to have a direct relationship to the king to be a nobleman. So in other words, we've got peasants, we've got nobles, and we've got townsfolk. The townsfolk are small. The towns in Hungary are minor. They're basically, they're not centres of manufacturing at all. They're centres where trade takes place or where merchants meet. And as a consequence, the towns are small. You're not going to really find much above 10,000 population. That's compared, if you look at, say, southern Germany, you've got a whole mass of towns all about 25,000. London, it's done 100,000 or something. So, in other words, the towns are small. And the merchant class is largely a foreign merchant class, or if it's indigenous, it is indigenous and German. I've spoken enough, 13 and 14 minutes. That'll take hours to download, or upload as I should say. So I will continue with this in a day or two's time. Thank you.